Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Starsector. The only game where it's perfectly acceptable to sell drugs to miners to fund a galactic-wide famine. Then use this opportunity to wage war on the hungry and conquer the galaxy for yourself. Which is essentially what the goal of today's video is. To see if we can bring peace to the galaxy by controlling the food market and starving out the competition. The first thing we needed to do though was make a character. Greg. Now, before we can subjugate the galactic food market, we were first going to need to make some money. Now, how were we going to do that? Now, there are many ways of making money in Starsector, but overall, my favorite is selling colorful chemicals to depressed pirate miners. This is because pirates as a faction suck. And there are many reasons for this. Their production of basically anything is non-existent. Their trade fleets consist of suicidal trade vessels that rarely get from point A to B. And most importantly, it's because everyone just fucking hates them. I know that's not very surprising, coming from a faction that would rather do business with your cold, dead, submissive body. But that, my friends, is where opportunity lies. Now, we can make a lot of money selling sewing kits to pirates. But who was going to supply us with the needles? This is where our boys over in Tritech come in. The only faction where you can legally buy cheap narcotics and then sell them onto the poor at extortionate prices. In fact, after we pulled a couple of high-level maneuvers... Oh, get duped! We managed to turn our initial 20,000 credits into a cool $500,000, which I thought was enough money to run a little experiment. So I headed off to the shipyards and started poking around for some new ships. I picked up this heavily armored cruiser called a Dominator and slapped 2 large guns on it along with these purple torpedo things that kind of ejaculate all over the enemy ship. I also picked up a Condor, which is a carrier, and I placed 2 claw fighters on it, which will paralyze the enemy and allow me to accurately ejaculate my purple load all over them. So what was my little experiment? Well, it was to create a localized famine to study the effects and also make a shit ton of money. And I think I had the perfect target. Remember when I said that pirates suck? Yeah! Well, one of the many fields that they suck in is agriculture. In fact, pirates only have one planet that produces food. So let's say if something was to accidentally happen to that farm, the pirates as a collective would have their in-faction exports of food removed. Step 2 would be to find an isolated planet, like this one, and then blow up the spaceport, which would lower their already limited access to the outside market. This should in theory create a never-ending demand for food across the entire pirate faction, which is something we can exploit. However, the pirates seem to disagree with being a part of our little Hunger Game, so we were going to need something to convince them. How about this 14th Battle Group Onslaught, just casually lying around in this system? It also had the location of a research station. And I'm ashamed to admit that I fell victim to my greed, as I immediately mothballed the ship and headed north towards the station. I was rewarded for my troubles and then made the rookie mistake of running out of fuel. No! Fuck! Not to worry, because after spamming the distress beacon for 5 minutes, this kind soul arrived to donate 58 fuel. I ain't offering to pay 20 grand. You're having a fucking laugh. To nobody's surprise, I didn't donate. Instead, I told the guy to go fuck himself and then fled the system. Although, I really should have given that man access to all my pockets, because upon trying to return home, we were pulled towards another system, and inside, we found this. Oh, and a mining station. And it had fuel tanks! That 58 fuel was a godsend! Upon returning to the core worlds, I stashed my loot inside this abandoned terraforming platform and headed off to kit out our new toy. With 2 thermal cannons, 2 devastators, and a storm needler, I thought that would be enough to convince them that their caloric intake should be regulated by me. But I didn't really trust myself to fly the Onslaught, so I went to the bar and hired this mercenary called Kennedy and put the Onslaught in her much more capable hands. I then demoted myself to the glorified position of point defense bitch. My role pretty much consisted of me sitting around and zapping missiles and disabling the fuck out of anyone that tried to assassinate our Kennedy. With the pirate fleet now defeated, we had free rein to begin our operation. I started off with ravaging their food production by planting my own seed deep into their soil in the form of a missile. I then headed off to Don, waltzed on in and blew up their starport. Thanks to the planet's now incredible -8% access, all we had to do was wait. It took only 2 months before Dawn started experiencing food shortages, which brought the planet's stability down to 0, which is terrible as it cripples the planet's defenses, lowers the quality of fleets that the planet produces, and if left unchecked for too long, can cause the planet to decivilize. But we didn't care about that for the time being, because with a commodity tab that looked like this, it was time to make some money. For the next hour, I trickled goods back and forth from Tritech to the pirates, and I kept this loop up of raiding, blockading, and profiteering until, it actually decivilized. Oh, such a meme. We raided that planet so much that the central authority has collapsed. Yeah, it turns out maybe holding a planet on the brink of starvation for too long has its repercussions. But as a forever optimist, I didn't want to let this, let's call it opportunity, go to waste. Now, this planet itself is pretty respectable. 125% hazard rating, adequate farming, and some basic resources. More importantly, it was a good foundation to build my empire on. Yes, the foundation might be built upon millions of pirates that we had starved to death, but ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to Greg's. Now, there was one small problem. This system was claimed by the hegemony, which meant they immediately demanded tribute from us for colonizing in their system, which I, believe it or not, willingly agreed to. I renamed the planet to Please Don't Murder Me Hedge and decided it was time to suck up to them a little bit. My simping began with me accepting exploration quests. All I had to do was run a survey package on said station and I would get paid, the loot, and some reputation. Now, this was actually a pretty big brain play on my behalf, as it allowed me to potentially stumble across planets with either rich or bountiful farmlands. No! Fuck off! I also stumbled across this, and I couldn't resist the temptation. The temptation of loot. It was so alluring. So tasty. I then jumped into a high-risk system and gave the Remnant Armada the slip so I could survey this Terran world. Not a bad planet, right? But if I wanted to colonize it, I was going to have to tussle with a horde of remnants. So that was pretty much out of the question for the time being. However, shortly after this find, I stumbled across this. Holy shit! That is 2 fucking Terran worlds next to each other, which I have personally never seen before. But it did also have an artillery station on it. But that's not too bad, I thought. All we had to do was kill it. It was just a station backed up with a bunch of domain-era trash. How hard could it be? Not only was I getting fisted by the artillery, the station also had a fuck ton of claw fighters that could disable the fuck out of me. But instead of firing a bunch of purple torpedoes at me, they threw Reapers in my face. And then just to top it all off, I met something called a wall class, which I don't know if you can tell, but is a literal wall of fucking guns. Yeah, it's safe to say we were not winning this fight. So I reloaded the game and returned home, grabbed all my shit and decided to colonize the planet next to the artillery station, which really put that thin line of text that states artillery safe spot to the test. Which, yeah, we were safe, but everything that came into the system got hit with a barrage of mortar fire, which started an endless loop of salvagers arriving to salvage the salvage from the dead salvagers that the salvagers who just died were salvaging, which then spawned in more salvagers to salvage the salvagers who just died salvaging the salvagers. In the end, I kind of just gave up and left the system in hopes to find some more ships lying about the galaxy. And believe it or not, in my travels, I came across this. A 14th Battle Group Legion, which I thought combined with my fleet that I had salvaged from the dead salvagers salvaging the other dead salvagers, which one of those ships included this. Now, you may remember this ship for being able to give you permanent hearing damage. My ears right now. I can't fucking hear anything. I thought we were ready to take on the artillery station again. Now, this battle started exactly the same as the last one, with me being smacked in the face with mortar fire. Unfortunately, my Nixie battleship might not have been able to destroy the mortar rounds, but it did an excellent job at murdering all the claw fighters, which made space for my capital ships to advance and start destroying some of their smaller ships. The next few minutes of this battle were just spent poking at each other until I pulled off this gamer move. I used my Dominator to bait the wall into turning, which opened up an opportunity for my onslaught to advance and destroy it. All we had to do then was destroy all the little frigates and then kill this mothership Guardian. which we just overwhelmed with numbers. And then we did exactly the same to the station. There we go. Holy crap. With the artillery station defeated, we were now able to colonize the Terran moon. Food. Which ended up being so much better than the other planet. With bountiful farmlands, plentiful organics, and a hazard rating of 75%, with only these two planets combined, we should be able to carve out a large share of the food market. Which leads me on to my next plan. Our little localized famine had taught me one thing, and that was controlling the flow of substance can make you a very wealthy man. But instead of bullying one faction, we were going to force the entire galaxy to rely on Gregs for their supper. Now, we already had 23% of the market share of food, which was netting us a profit of 69,000, which was nice and all, but with total control of the food market, we could earn 322,000. So I gathered 2 ships and 500 marines and set off to firebomb the entire galaxy's food supply. With a sensor profile of 16, we were able to slip past the patrol fleet without worry. Even though we were undetected, we still took a small hit to our relations for every raid that we did. But that's okay though, because along the way, I picked up ambassadors to throw in our embassies to justify our hostile takeover of the food market. And after just a couple of months, the market looked like this. The galaxy was now stuck between eating quality British cuisine or whatever Tritech produced. And personally, I was happy to share the food market with my brothers over at Tritech, as they had been my trade partners since the start of the game. But then I saw they had 33% of the market share. With total control of the food market, we were now making 311,000 credits a month from food, because I'm guessing some people must have died or something. Which I wouldn't be surprised, considering a majority of the galaxy was now starving. It doesn't matter though, because Greg's HQ was making us over 200,000 credits a month. And with that money coming in, we were able to colonize the surrounding planets and start building some heavy industry. With the rise of heavy industry, we were now able to start producing some of our own ships. A few favorites were this little guy that flat out refused to die no matter how many ships it went up against. My favorite carrier, dubbed the Box of Angry Bees, which basically just pisses out an endless wave of shitty mining drones. And a couple of IEDs just for good measure. It's right, because these ships were only a precaution, because I doubt anyone would actually declare war on me at this point. Well, fuck. With war declared on me by both the Sindrians and the Luddic Church, this was a perfect opportunity to expand our empire into the core worlds. So I put together a radical fleet doctrine and set off to liberate Voltan from their Sindrian oppressors. I picked Voltan because it was the Sindrians' only food-producing planet, which wasn't producing food, and because it's smack bang in the center of the core worlds. So I put together an invasion fleet and waited for it outside the system. And this is what turned up. I'm just looking at this fleet. What the fuck is this? Now, I don't know what was actually worse, my invasion fleets or my lack of FPS inside this system, because after several confrontations with the Sindrian Navy, both my invasion fleets and my will to live were gone. With my invasion fleets destroyed, it was only right to sign a temporary ceasefire with the Sindrians to give me a little bit of time to rebuild. As at this point, I was making bank. With all this money coming in, I was now able to spam out a bunch of military high commands to increase my fleet budget. With a much higher fleet budget and a less simple fleet doctrine, I ventured back into the core worlds and completely wiped the floor with the Sindrians. Not only did we liberate Volta, we wiped out the entire faction. The Luddic Church, on the other hand, was a little more difficult, as I got to experience the joys of playing Ring Around the Rosie with an Invictus. Fuck no! Also, you know a ship's bullshit when it can survive 14 torpedoes in the ass. Right, that Devastator cannon is finally dead. Right, send in the spam of torpedoes. Oh, yeah. It survived all of that. What the fuck is this thing? But sadly for them, it was not enough to save them. With both the Sindrians and the Church now dead, I finally joined the cooperative alliance with the Persian League and Tritech, and renamed the alliance to the Coalition of Greg. Now, the only remaining faction was the Hedge, and I really could not be fucked to fight a massive war with them. So, with a little bit of espionage, I was able to solve the Persians' beef with the Hedge and raise relations enough between the two factions to invite the Hedge into our little cooperative. And with that, we achieved peace within the galaxy through a diplomatic victory. Yes, it might have cost millions of lives and mass starvation across the galaxy, but oh boy was it worth it. I want to thank all my patrons for not letting me starve, and thank you for watching.